Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to On Trial, starring Mark Radulich, also starring Sean Comer. Hope you're ready, Hollywood, because you're on trial.
All right, good evening, everybody. This is On Trial, brought to you by the Radulich in Broadcasting Network. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight, the movie we'll be putting on trial is Christopher Nolan's Inception. I'll be prosecuting this mother, and here to defend it far and wide to all the people of all the ages, my co-host, Mr. Sean Comer. How do you do, sir?
Line of us for the defense, sir.
All right. This was one that I picked, and that's because, as I said, my brother-in-law has been hounding me to watch this movie for 7 years, as he reminded me today. And I thought, okay, well, now's as good a time as any. That's literally as much thought as went into this show. The other thing I'll say is, I'm kind of 50-50 on Chris Nolan, and I know the concept of Inception was not one that had initially attracted me to the movie. I'm not interested in dreamscape type movies. They just don't interest me. So it's probably why I avoided it all these years. But I went into this one with an open mind. In fact, I went into it thinking I was going to defend the thing, so I really had to have an open mind. But it turns out prosecuting. And boy, do I have a line of reasoning as to why this movie is not as good as Rotten Tomatoes on it, who gave it a positive review, would have to believe. But before we get there, Sean, come in here and talk about the movie a bit, do your thing. Sean, can you hear me at all?
Okay, for all I know, Mark, you just asked me if I wear ladies' underwear, and my answer to you and to everybody else would be, wouldn't you like to know?
Okay, so for the 5 minutes, it's just been inaudible nonsense.
I heard most of it except for the part where I think you tried to pitch it to me to do the trivia bit.
Yep. Hit it, babe.
Oh, Blog Talk Radio. Die in a fire. So, there really isn't just a whole lot of really fascinating trivia to go around with this one. You got an ensemble cast that, of course, is led by Leonardo DiCaprio, who is one of my generation's more beloved actors, whose appeal I've just never gotten. And I'm not even going to pretend to be remotely sorry, but I happen to enjoy him in this one. But otherwise, the cast is also rounded out by the likes of Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is outstanding, Ellen Page, who is Ellen Page, Marion Cotillard, who is superb, Ken Watanabe, he's Ken Watanabe, Tom Hardy is Tom Hardy, Dilip Rao is an actor who has been in movies with lines, movies you can see. Cillian Murphy isn't really given just a whole lot of meat in this movie, but I like Cillian Murphy, so I was glad to see him. Tom Berenger, and we also have the always wonderful Michael Caine. About all you really need to know about this is the fact that when Christopher Nolan initially presented an 80-page treatment to Warner Brothers back in 2002, this was a horror film, which was going to be about dream thieves and rooted in the very real and fascinating concept of lucid dreaming. However, he ended up ultimately setting that aside for a while, and instead, in the intervening years, he ended up making Batman Begins in 2005, The Prestige in 2006, The Dark Knight in 2008, and he gave it 6 months of revisions, and Warner Brothers picked it up in February of 2009. It was ultimately filmed in a total of 6 countries, starting in Tokyo in June 19th, and ultimately wrapping in Canada on November 22nd of that year. Legendary Pictures and Warner Brothers split the $160 million budget, and in the end, it did quite damn well. It ultimately ended up making $825.5 million at the box office. It won Academy Awards for, unsurprisingly, Best Cinematography, Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Visual Effects. And it was ultimately nominated for an additional 4: Best Picture, Best Original Screenplay, Best Art Direction, and Best Original Score. So that's really about it. Otherwise, there's not a whole lot more juicy stuff about it, except it's a Christopher Nolan movie. It is characteristically just a wee bit weird, and everybody seems to either love or hate it. And it's a good thing. It might be a good thing that we switched up on this, because you were not a fan, and I, on the other hand, have always liked it. I'll concede that it really doesn't hold up quite so well on a second viewing, but still, it's fun. I'll watch it anytime it happens to be on. It's the ultimate wouldn't kick it out of bed for eating crackers under the covers kind of movie. So,
all right. So here we have and just butt in if I become too inaudible. Let me know, and I will do what the Blog Talk Radio Solutions person told me, which is basically hang up and dial back in again.
Blog Talk Radio, you were the opposite of fucking Batman.
Yes, their solution. Unplug, plug it in. Anywho, our plot is basically this. We have Leonardo DiCaprio, who plays a character who does industrial espionage. He steals people through the use of dreams. And he's being wants a base character, plan an idea, perform an Inception on who the actor plays from Batman Begins. So he's by George. They recruit Ellen Page to bring in Tom Hardy and a few others. And basically, they're going to create a multi-level sequence where they're going to basically try to convince this person that this idea is known. And the idea is break up his energy company that left him to go do something. And the reason why Watanabe wants to do that is, as he put in the film, they can no longer compete. So he is attempting to trick Scarecrow into dissolving his own company and eliminating the competition for him. And then the rest of it's just that. They're trying to get into the vault, as it were. There's the initial dream where they're on the streets of Los Angeles, and immediately they're pursued by these projections, and these projections are basically with guns. Where are you, Sean?
I'm here.
Okay.
Wait. Do you mean where I am, as in where am I? Do you mean where am I, as in where am I located?
Yeah, just there was a lot of all of a sudden, like there was just a lot of background noise. I'm like, are you in a crowd somewhere?
No. Okay. Well, I am kind of. I'm actually at, hey, free plug here. I'm at Urban Beans on 7th Street in Phoenix, enjoying a wonderful vegetarian breakfast burrito. I'm working late tonight, so I always go out somewhere where I can get a bite to eat.
All right, good for you. Meanwhile, back in the city, second dream sequence, and then third, they're at a hospital somewhere. It looks like in the Alps. And this is where they're trying to get him to get into this safe where he finds the will, and this is going to convince him because through his father's shame and disappointment that he should break up the company. Along the way, there's misfires, there's accidents, there's the added pressure of if they die in this dream, as opposed to waking up, this time they'll go to limbo, so that's an added danger. And this is also Leonardo DiCaprio can get home to his children. He is basically on the run for the murder of his wife. And over the course of the movie, you get more details about that. There's the secondary plot, I guess, of him, dealing and wrestling with the guilt of what he did. He didn't physically murder her, but spoiler alert, what you'll find is he planted the idea when they were living in the dream world that and he didn't want to leave, so he put the idea, that I think it was, that they were in fact, and she didn't get that thought out of her head. She ended up committing suicide in the dream world. So he has guilt over that. They do pull off the job, I guess. He does go home, I guess, because the last thing you see is his totem, which if it falls, he's in the real world, and if it keeps spinning, he's in the dream world. And it's alluded to, the last thing is the totem is still spinning, which tells you he's in the dream world, but it could just be that the camera pulled away before it fell. So it's vague, it's ambiguous. That's how the movie ends. All right. If it pleases the court, we still basically hear me more or less?
If it pleases the court, what now?
I asked you if you could still hear me.
Yeah, you kind of cut out there for a little bit briefly, but yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So that's the plot synopsis, as much of it as you could hear tonight. So here goes. Here's my arguments against the movie. I don't have a tremendous amount of them, but there are some problems, and I think the biggest one is if this is supposed to be a dream world. See, I feel like the movie's biggest attraction, and I'm going to compare it to a movie that did this successfully. If the movie's biggest attraction is the Wonderland feature, they are in a dream world, a world where anything goes, anything can exist. It's all in your mind. It's fantasy. He went with bland action movie as his set piece. I mean, don't get me wrong, and I'm gonna help show him with his argument here. It looks beautiful. These are wonderfully beautiful, especially in IMAX, or Blu-ray set pieces. But in terms of let your imagination run wild in a dream world where you are a god of your own making, it's extraordinarily bland. It's just cars crashing into things and bullets flying, and the Los Angeles, a hotel, and a hospital on a snowy bank. Whoop-de-freaking-do. And outside of one sequence where Joseph Gordon-Levitt is dealing with the rolling building and no gravity. If you didn't know this movie was Inception, you'd have no idea it was a dream world. You would assume this was your, London Has Fallen or some shit, or a James Bond movie. It's just a regular action movie. Now there are certain scenes, especially early on, where you have the city falling in on itself, and the bit with the explosions and whatnot, and the dreams crumbling, and those were interesting. But then for the bulk of the movie, it all stops. And I guess what I'm saying is, think about The Matrix, not the shitty sequels. Just the first one. The good one. Think about what they did there. They said, it's a dream world. It's Wonderland. Alice. Alice? Who the fuck is Alice? Sorry, it's a whole other thing. Once Neo knew he was in the Matrix, Neo could do God stuff. They played with the visuals. They played with the characters' powers. I mean, they explained it in a tech way where, oh, you're uploading these abilities, or where we're writing code to give you a giant bazooka. But ultimately, that's the fun of the movie. But this is fun in that respect. I'm not saying it's not a fun movie to watch because, let's face it, I as much as anyone else, likes to watch shit blow up and people shoot at one another. But you had an opportunity, Mr. Nolan, to create fanciful, and you gave us the average shoot-'em-up action movie look and in feel. That's probably the movie's biggest crime against cinema, is lost opportunity. My second issue with this movie is they talk about the projections, and these are the villains, basically. The movie has no standard villain as such. Everyone here is kind of a shitty person, maybe with the exception of Ellen Page. But as heist movies go, where everyone's basically a criminal, think Ocean, that sort of thing. Everyone there's kind of shitty too. It's thieves and bigger thieves. Okay, I get it. We don't always have to have the white hat and the black hat. I'm fine with this. But if you're going to set your protagonists against an antagonist, you one of the, I think, the structural features of creating an antagonist is giving them some weight, something to, giving your audience something to care about, even in the sense that they must be defeated. Hoping to get the job done, which brings me to another issue. But let me finish this last point. If you're not invested in their mission, this is just spectacular, because we don't care if any of them. They're the Lucas bots from the Phantom Menace, basically. The Ultron bots from the Age of Ultron. They're just mindless orcs from the trilogy. There's no substance to them, really no danger to them. I mean, other than you're watching them shoot guns at our quote unquote heroes or protagonists. But that's it. You're not given any sort of central antagonist to focus on even. It's just video game nonsense. So I felt like when I lost interest in the mission, I lost interest in the plot, all you're left with is guys shooting at one another, which is fine in a 90-minute movie. But for almost 3 hours, I wanted to throw myself out the fucking window. So, as I said, that brings me to yet another issue, and that is, I'm going to keep going with Scarecrow. So, sorry, folks. That the Mark, okay? This is the guy the gig revolves around. They're trying to perform the Inception on him. And they either needed to make him extraordinarily shitty so that you cheer for your protagonist and get a job done on him, or make him in some way the antagonist, defeating their purpose, working against them and resisting their efforts. He just kind of goes along for the ride. And on top of that, he's a thoroughly interesting character. Like, the whole thing is that they're trying to get him to break apart his company. And at a minimum, you should have, as an audience member, either said, yay, I think that's a great idea, go Team Leo, or boo, resist. Don't let them make you do it. And I was just ambivalent. I'm ambivalent because he's such a dry character. You know, the little bit of characterization they gave him was he thinks or he believes his dad was disappointed in him. And he does state in the movie that he has a shitty relationship, or he had a shitty relationship with his dad. But that's not really enough to make me invested in this character. So they're carrying around this football that nobody cares about, basically, which drags the movie. Now, if you're invested in just Leonardo DiCaprio and his, you know, internal struggle with guilt, that's fine, but that's not really the movie. That's a portion of it. It's a subplot, but everything else deals with the Inception, and the Inception wasn't interesting enough, in my opinion. I think that, well, I'm not going to talk about the ending. The ending is a personal issue for me, but I don't think that, well, no, I'll say this. You can get away, I think, in some movies with vague, ambiguous endings. Works great in horror films. I don't know if it worked well in this one. And here's why. And this really is not just a personal preference. This really is a craft issue. At the minimum, they were trying to get you invested in the mission. And I feel like to leave it ambiguous at the very end to see if they actually accomplish the mission robs the audience of a certain satisfaction. I really do. I think that goes beyond personal preference. I think to set this up, execute, and then maybe they got away with it, maybe they didn't. Maybe he's in the dream world, maybe he's not. Who knows? Seems cheap. Seems like, as a group, the writer, director, producers didn't want to plant a flag and definitively say something. They were just like, well, let's just leave it ambiguous. And, you know, let the audience decide. And I don't know. That needs to have a purpose. Doing it for the sake of doing it seems lazy to me. So I shall now I shall now turn it over to the defense. Your witness, sir.
Thank you, Your Holiness. Ladies and gentlemen of the jerky, I would posit that Inception, in fact, actually, in its own way, continues in a great tradition, in principle, of all great science fiction. Everything from Star Trek and Star Wars to the literature of Jules Verne, Isaac Asimov, and Arthur C. Clarke. It takes science fact and extrapolates it. And that in itself is the first brilliant element of Inception. It takes the nature of dreaming. It takes a real, fairly documented, if somewhat ambiguous anecdotal phenomenon of lucid dreaming, and it makes a great proposition. What if we can not only control our own dreams, but what if we can control what someone else dreams? It, in its own way, it harkens a little bit to another movie that I happen to love, and that's Minority Report, which itself is based on a short story by yet another great science fiction author, Philip K. Dick. It is, to say the least, an ambitious movie. Not only in visual either. Oh no, because focus strictly on that is to miss just how far it really reaches in terms of its structure, in terms of its narrative, in terms of its characters. You have a movie that performs a juggling act that, to be quite honest with you, chooses not to treat its audience like idiots. It chooses to make them think, makes them wonder, makes them question right up to the end of it. It doesn't lay everything else out neatly. I was reminded after I saw this movie of how I fully expected to hear about the same reactions from people I knew who walked out of American Beauty and Fight Club and saying, I didn't get it.
I didn't get it. What happened? What? I didn't get that at the end. So the guy was just talking to himself the whole time. That was going on. So no, Tyler was Jack, and Jack was Tyler. Is that it?
Because heaven forbid art make you actually burn a brain cell or two. No, it takes that structure and it makes you think, makes you fight to keep up. And it leaves you with a sense of accomplishment when you really do understand everything that's going on. And as for the lack of investment, I couldn't disagree more. You know, I'm not the biggest Leonardo DiCaprio fan. In fact, off the top of my head, I could name these 3 movies he's been in where he was really genuinely enjoyable to watch to me. And those 3 are What's Eating Gilbert Grape, Catch Me If You Can, and Inception.
Objection. You're forgetting the Basketball Diaries.
I didn't dig the Basketball Diaries, so overruled. Hey, my point was that I had only enjoyed him in that many movies. If you liked him in the Basketball Diaries, then by all means, enjoy your watching him jack off on a rooftop. Be my bloody guest. You know, you have fun with that if that is what twists your Snapple. But in this case, I actually did find myself quite invested in Cobb. And in retrospect, I remember seeing the movie for the first time and initially thinking to myself, this was a role that would have been better played by Levitt. I got to think that this casting was somehow just an accident of paperwork, and they just didn't have the heart to tell Leo when he said he was so happy to be playing Cobb that, you're supposed to be playing Arthur. But in hindsight, I see now that Nolan had been spending years trying to find the right project to work with DiCaprio on, but I could never quite convince him until Inception came along. And actually, in fact, folks, it could have been worse. Brad Pitt and Will Smith were both offered the role too. So, by all means, chew on the movie we could have got. But the reason I'm invested in him so much is because of 2 reasons, 2 things that he's got going on. And number one, the fact that he's a man who's tired of running. He spent years upon years upon years as a fugitive, never being able to settle down, never being able to really savor a life with the people that he loves. And he's desperate to bring that to an end. But at the same time, I harken back to what I believe is a Buddhist proverb, and I could have this wrong. And it states, in order to have everything, you have to give everything up. Don Cobb is a man who can't give up his everything. He can't let go of his wife. He's determined through it all, even if it has to be veiled in secrecy and endanger him and ultimately everybody he knows and cares about, to hang on to her with an absolute, utter death grip. He cannot and will not let go. And if that's something you can't relate to, then quite frankly, for all the movies that have, yes, I will admit, probably depicted this better, if that's something that you can't relate to and connect to, then I can only assume that you're somebody who has never experienced that kind of loss. Because at some point, we all have somebody, whether it's a significant other, a family member, a friend, that one way or another, be it by death or estrangement, we have to let go of. That is not always easy. Sometimes it's the hardest thing in the world to do, even though you know it's what would be best for both of you. It's the one thing that Cobb can't do, in part because it also means accepting some degree of responsibility for why she's gone, why she's dead in the first place. He may not have killed her, he may not have thrown her out the window, but he knows that it was him that put the pieces in place that caused her mind to snap and caused her to walk out there and set it up so that if he didn't follow her, he would spend the rest of his life on the run for murder. Pat is absolutely relatable. And for that, I have to, even if somewhat grudgingly, give DiCaprio credit that he pulls that off very, very well. As for the rest of it, ultimately, in a way, restraint is not a word that you see thrown around very often when it comes to Inception. But in terms of the action scenes that he created, personally, I actually have to give Nolan credit for not going the full-on, trippy, what dreams may come route with full-on, wacky surrealism. And don't get me wrong, that's another movie that I actually enjoy. But I don't think that would have suited what Nolan wanted to do here. It doesn't suit who Nolan is as an auteur. That's not his style. That's the kind of thing you bring in Guillermo del Toro for. But ultimately, this was his vision through and through. He wrote it, he championed it, he revised it, he directed it. This is a man's effort to take cinema beyond someplace where it had been. And for a man who is an avatar of, I don't want to say convoluted, misshapen and challenging narrative structures, that is saying something when it's challenging even by his standards. When you think about movies like Memento and Following, that played so fast and loose with the order of events and made you have to think of things a little bit differently, just to keep pace with what was going on, and to really warp your mind for that 2 hours and take yourself out of the way you see things such as causality. It was actually profoundly effective, in my opinion. Now, I will confess to some bias. I have got a massive hard-on for heist films, just in general. And I also love film noir. And this is absolute both. It's equal parts heist film and noir. I love it. I love the chess match. I love the moves and the counter moves, the strategy and the misdirection and the defense. I love it. And to really have that play out, you needed to set it. Or to play it effectively, you needed to set it in a world that was somewhat grounded in the aesthetics of the real world. Because we're not exactly talking about the kind of especially creative people in terms of mindset who would exactly dream up your typical Alice in Wonderland, all the drugs on Earth looks like a box of Crayola crayons vomited on the screen landscape. These are people who would keep their dreams probably somewhat relatable because, well, they just don't seem to have a mind for much else. It makes total sense to me. As for the ambiguity of the ending, I even like that. I like the uncertainty. I like how it plays into the fact that art, to a certain extent, so often becomes our own. It takes on meaning that perhaps the artist didn't mean, but to us, the audience, the people receiving it, we see it through our own prism. We see it through our own smoke and mirrors, so to speak. And it becomes and that's how it becomes something that really embeds itself. Yeah, sometimes you hear a song and its mood couldn't be more opposite of what you actually feel, because you're passing it through your own emotions, and it's accepting some of those colors and carrying them forward. In my opinion, that's what the ending is. In a way, it is what you make of it. I mean, maybe it's just the way I view it, but I could swear that when you watch it closely enough, you can just barely start to see that totem start to wobble just a little bit while it's spinning, like it's about to fall over. But it just barely doesn't quite. It's not that unlike how, if you talk to some fans of Minority Report, they'll point out that there's a theory that the main character, and forgive me for as much as I like it, I have no mind for this stuff sometimes. Tom Cruise's character, ultimately, quite possibly, the entire end of the movie has been him living out a dream, just because of another interaction earlier in it. It's that fun you get to have with headcanon. It's not something you typically expect from Christopher Nolan, but it's there. He's the master of the unexpected when it comes to his endings. He's everything that M. Night Shyamalan wishes that he was. So, I would posit that while the movie has its flaws, especially in terms of the fact that, while I disagree with it, I can understand how people would point out that it just becomes another blockbuster. Look deeper at this movie. Look deeper at what it tries to do with narrative, with character, with carrying out a kind of cerebral action that involves more than just what you see. Look even at Cillian Murphy and the fact that, yeah, he could have really played it over the top one way or another, been immensely likable, been immensely dislikable. But actually, I like his subtlety. I like it because, in his own way, it makes him a force on both sides. That subtlety, that evenness, it keeps him, well, it makes him, for one thing, a mostly oblivious mark to this whole thing. By the same token, it also keeps him from feeling too out of place on either side of the equation, both as being the target and also as being ultimately somebody that we're rooting for because he, whether he likes it or knows it or not, and whether he would like it if he knew it or not, has a hand in helping Cobb reach his objective, which is ultimately to complete this mission, to complete this job, so that he no longer has to run, and so that he can finally let go. The defense rests, my captain.
My final argument, I want to address one of the things that you said, because there is a point that I agree with, and that is, if the movie just focuses on Leonardo DiCaprio struggling with his guilt, and he meets Ellen Page, and Ellen Page, through the course of their relationship, gets him to confront this thing and deal with his guilt. Okay, granted, it's a whole other movie, but it's a much more, I think, rich and interesting movie about a man using dreams to, one, deal with his, live in his guilt, deal with his guilt, not be willing to give up his lost love, but also at the end working through that guilt and trying to come out a better man on the other side. Black Mirror Season 2 actually deals with this very same concept, and I thought it did 100% better. Had the movie been about his grief and anxiety and this relationship, it would have been more interesting to me. The best part of the movie. Say what you will about Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's awesome in The Basketball Diaries. Shut up. No, I'm just kidding. Beyond whacking off on a roof, him screaming at the end, I can't get that out of my head. Say what you will about Leonardo DiCaprio, but I mean, the man can act. And I don't buy, much like I don't buy Tom Cruise as an action hero in the Jack Reacher sense of the word action hero. I don't buy Leonardo DiCaprio in that kind of role either, but I do buy him as a grieving widow, as an angst-ridden person wrestling with guilt. And those elements of the movies were, to me, the most magnetic, the most interesting. Cop shoot cop, DC has fallen, Die Hard elements of the movie distracted from the story that I wanted to see. I know that's why nobody went. They wanted to see the stuff I just talked about. But none of that was interesting to me. Just more of the same. Him wrestling with his, with all of this mental health stuff and the dream elements to it, and what Ellen Page brought to her character in terms of somebody who is running a gamut of emotions. She's shocked by him. She's in a lot of ways disgusted by him. She is trying to help him. And at some point, I think she takes the bulls by the horns and sort of pushes things in a certain direction. All of that makes the movie for me. Everything else is almost a distraction. Here's the problem. It's like 1/3 of the movie. And that's being generous. 2/3 of this movie is nonsense action. And as I said before, not interesting enough to keep me invested. If not for that 1/3, the movie loses me entirely. So in that aspect, I do agree with Sean. That's some of the best stuff. It's everything else to me that it's just like, ugh, okay, sure, why not? But the one thing I want to add here is, Chris Nolan's a funny director. Here's a guy who specializes in visuals, creates just wonderful visuals, wonderful action set pieces. Who doesn't love the opening bit of The Dark Knight with the Joker's gang robbing the bank? It's incredible. And yet, boy, is his dialogue wordy. And I'm sure somebody hearing that, hi, Robert Winfrey. I'm sure somebody says, oh, Radulich, you dope. No, it's not that I don't get it. It's how do you manage to create such a visually stunning movie that also includes large blocks of expository dialogue that just stop the movie cold? I've said this before with other movies. I said it 2 weeks ago with Big Trouble in Little China. You have to be careful with how you give exposition. You either have to make the visuals interesting while it's happening, or you have to do it in such a way that it's delivered, the audience gets it, and then we're back to the action again. This movie is a lot of people standing and yelling when they're not shooting. And it drove me nuts after a while. I watched some of this with my dad today, and we both sort of looked at each other at the end of the movie and went, did you notice how it felt like it didn't follow its own rules at times? And the cast members kept yelling the rules at you? That's what I got from this. And again, I think that's a flaw of the writing and the direction. Show me, don't tell me. And again, stop me putting so much effort in creating a beautiful van slowly falling off a bridge, and put some of that energy into into showing me some of the exposition that your characters are either screaming into the camera or Tom Hardy is mumbling. Jesus Christ. This was another one where I couldn't find a good volume to watch it at. People are either yelling or mumbling. So I'm going to give Sean the last word here, but that's where I've landed with this thing. It's very uneven. The best parts are Leo's relationship, and I wish Chris Nolan would look at some of his movies and go, maybe this doesn't need to be yelled at the audience. Maybe there's another way to deliver this information. Maybe.
I don't really have just a whole lot to add. I think that Mark made some surprisingly relevant points, but surprisingly.
Thanks.
But overall, I feel like there's not much left to say that's necessarily in support of it. It's got a brilliant ensemble cast, and yes, Christopher Nolan loves his dialogue. But at the same time, yes, Tom Hardy being incomprehensible aside, when you have a cast like that, why not give them plenty to do? I mean, he really made this in its own way an actors movie for people like DiCaprio and Levitt and Hardy and, although I'm not as much of a fan, Ellen Page and Cillian Murphy and Ken Watanabe. All people for whom they're not action stars by nature. I mean, that's what makes all the action scenes, seems to me, both a bit admittedly inexplicable, but also the fact that I'm impressed he was able to carry them off as well as he was with actors for whom that isn't exactly necessarily their bread and butter. I mean, yes, you can plug Tom Hardy into that, as he's demonstrated numerous times, and he'll pull it off beautifully. I think he's one of the best acting action stars of his generation. But to do the same thing with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Leonardo DiCaprio, people you don't, and Cillian Murphy, people you don't necessarily think of in that vein, I think that merits at least a little bit of appreciation. And I think that it really, ultimately, I didn't feel there was necessarily that much of an imbalance. Yes, it shifts gears distinctly, but somehow, to me anyway, it still felt satisfying. I mean, to make the dream world appealing, yeah, you had to make it fairly active. It had to be action packed. You couldn't have made it quite as rich in dialogue as the first movie, or the first half of the movie, I should say. I'm rambling a little bit and losing my focus because I also lost my online notes here because I lost my internet connection. Admittedly, shut up. Although props to you, whoever has the Wi-Fi network that's named Bill Murray Spy Fan 0609. You are kind of awesome. But I feel it's a movie that's best appreciated fully for what it is underneath all of that. You have to really look past the fact that the action is just a bit unremarkable, and see that you won't find too many stories quite like it, especially when it comes to the movie in its own way being a comment on making movies itself, which is really what else but the building of somebody's dream, bringing it to life and inserting players into it. You know, in a way, that's what the actors in any movie are. They're players in somebody else's dream. it's a bit high-minded, and I could see how some would perhaps view it as being a bit pretentious. But still, when you really think about it, at a time when, as moviegoers, we're absolutely howling for originality, when all we keep complaining about are, remakes and sequels, too many action movies that all look alike, and nothing's got an original story. Do we really want to go so far as to shit too hard on something that's at least trying to do something different? I should say that tried. And that was wholly original, and that you can really point to few movies that are exactly like it. Quite frankly, I think it deserves to stand on its own merit.
All right. Well, we leave it to you folks, the jury, to decide, is this movie guilty of pretension and nonsense or not guilty? And is everything Sean said it was? We leave it to you. You can contact me on Twitter at Mark Radulich. You can contact Sean. Sean, how can they contact you?
Contact me on Twitter at Comer Codex, or you can always hit me up on Facebook. As always, I have multiple accounts. Look for the one that is represented by Iron Man's Mark I helmet. That's the other thing. That's the best way to reach me.
Okay. The other thing you can do is the player is up on the Radulich and Broadcasting Network Facebook page. Feel free to leave a comment on it. Gavin and Robert Winfrey already have. Apparently, I'm dead to Robert Winfrey. Makes me sad. But this has been On Trial. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed talking about the movie. Even, even as I said 2 weeks ago, even in the role of deconstructing these things and finding the flaws with them, I still enjoy talking about them, and I certainly enjoy the give and take with Sean. So I'm going to end it there. As far as plugs, just real quick, this week, I'm going to pull up my calendar here. So on Monday, here we go. We had the So What You Reading special on Source Material. Robert Cooper, Robert Winfrey, and I talked Voltron, Legendary Defender Season 2 on Tuesday. Yesterday, I was mostly audible for this show. We reviewed Firewind's Immortals and yelled out, "This is Sparta," any number of times. Lots of fun was had. Friday night, the So What You Reading special Part 2. I believe I'm on that one. Talking Moon Knight, talking Batman, Mad Love, and I believe Green Lantern Rebirth. Yep, I'm deep diving into the list you gave me like 2 years ago and trying to get through all those books. Sunday, we've got the 401 Ground and Pound show. On Monday, So What You Reading Part 3. Pat will be on. We'll finally get into Fuller House Season 2 on Tuesday. That's our TV party for the week. I got through all of Season 2. And maybe it's the oxygen deprivation, but I laughed any number of times. I thoroughly enjoyed Season 2. I only had to fast forward through a few things maybe once or twice because it was too much to bear.
That's it. The brain bleeding has set in.
A tumor the size of a large stone. Wednesday on the Metal Hammer of Doom, we'll be reviewing Creator Gods of Violence. Our start time will be 10:30 because Robert Cooper doesn't get out of work till 10. And then Gavin and his will be coming back for Because Name Made Me. And we're still working through his Paul Thomas Anderson movies. So God help me, I'm going to watch The Master, and we'll review it together. God help us all. And lastly, next in 2 weeks, the TV party will be Black Mirror Season 2. And on the Metal Hammer of Doom, we'll be reviewing If He Dies, which is my friend's band from New York. Hi, Frank Moravsky. He plays drums. And our next On Trial, and this will be my last plug, our next On Trial, Sean's pick. No, there'll be no Damn You Hollywood for the new Resident Evil release, which has got a pretty rotten rating so far. But that doesn't stop us from going back in the archives and looking at the original, we'll be putting Resident Evil on trial. And I guess you're defending and I'm prosecuting, right?
No. Actually, since I have defended 2 weeks in a row, I'm going to do something that is not going to be, well, at the same time, it's going to be both not easy and it's going to be interesting. And I'm actually going to prosecute a movie that I genuinely liked.
Okay. I'm putting it in my notes. You all heard me. What am I doing? Am I prosecuting or defending?
You're going to be defending Resident Evil.
Okay. Good. The law firm of Radulich and Jew will be open to defend all crap movies. The crap defender is on the rise.
Yeah, the really good news being, I'm just going to come right out and say it because I've heard both sides of this. You might very well have the hard job this time out.
Awesome. I love it. Well, February is going to be fun for me because not only will I be defending Resident Evil, I will also be. I demand to be. There's no debate. I often defer. I am awful willing to negotiate, but on this, there will be no such negotiations. I will defend Catwoman. God damn it. I will make a cogent argument in favor of this movie. This I promise you.
Oh, okay. Hang on a second here. Let me ask you something.
Sure.
Are you wanting to defend this movie because you... God, please don't let your answer be the sum of all my fears. Actually like it?
I've only seen parts of it.
Or are you wanting to defend this because you actually think it's going to be legitimately a challenge and you're trying to really flex your cerebral muscle?
Well, like I said, I've only seen parts of it. This will be the first time I'm going to sit through the whole thing straight through. And more of the second one than the first. I feel like I'm very, very good, whether it be professionally, personally, or as a movie reviewer, in finding the good in things. I feel like I really can identify the objectively good in something or someone. And I want to put that to the test. I want to show people.
I will give you even more credit, actually. I will say you're actually good at both ends. Because in the times I've listened to you review something, or various things I should say, I have heard you both miraculously find the good in something that I thought was horrendous and make a compelling argument to the point where I had to say, all right, I get where you're coming from. And at the same time, Luke, I've also heard you, Cage, come up with absolute, utter heaps of insane, not even remotely as good as the finale of The Wire, praise for something that made me sit there after I had watched it and knowing you had watched it, hearing what you thought, and say, did we watch the same goddamn thing? I've seen you do both. I've seen you find the good in something. I've also at times heard you nitpick things kind of unnecessarily. So I'm interested to hear that. And actually, speaking of, I just recently, just now, everybody, as soon as I say this, I'm just going to say this preemptively, shut up, leave me alone, saw a movie that you had a very interesting take on, and that's Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently saw it. I did not mind the ending as much as you did, My issue with it is the fact that the string of Marvel doing terrible villains continues.
Oh, God. You ain't kidding, Buster.
Yeah, I just... No investment whatsoever in Zemo. Absolutely none.
Could have replaced him with a paper bag.
Oh, easily.
I think Winfrey and I said the villain needed to be what's-his-face, General What's-he from the Hulk, who's now the...
General Ross?
Yeah, the villain needed to be General Ross. Not stupid Zemo. That was a waste. But I'm sorry. Go on.
I guess they didn't want to go full bad guy with him, which I don't understand because in the comics he is not a good guy. He's not a villain, but he's not a good person either. He's not somebody you even remotely root for. I actually thought the movie had its high points. It had its things that I liked. I thought that Pepper's absence being reduced to a half-assed exposition dump that didn't even sound like Robert Downey Jr. gave a dribbling shit about. I thought that was pretty paltry. I continue to not be very fond of the way that they've dealt with Tony's PTSD, or rather their lack of dealing with it. I truly always have and always will loathe Hawkeye being reduced to a joke butt when in the comics he's such an excellent character. God, if we sit here and talk about everything I've hated about the way they've treated Black Widow, we'll be here all goddamn night. As opposed to having a surprisingly succinct 1 hour show. But I don't know. It's one of those weird times where I kind of sort of agreed with you, and at the same time I went, yeah, it's flawed, and I could point out exactly where it's deeply flawed, but damn if I'm not enjoying this anyway.
All right, let me revisit this 1 second, and I'm going to do this in like 50 words or less. I distinctly remember saying I liked the movie up until the end, and in retrospect, I went a little crazy on the review. And I'm still mad about it. I mean, I have watched Civil War 2 or 3 times since I saw it in the movies and reviewed it with Winfrey, and I stand by that's the worst scene in the movie, and it took me out of it. But up until then, it was fine. I was enjoying the movie. So it's not like I don't like the movie. I enjoyed it. It just gets to that reveal, and it's a big eye roll for me. And then, as I'm saying this, they move past it quickly enough, and then it's just the triple threat match between the 3 characters. And I do like the way that it finally ends. With him nearly killing Tony and showing just a modicum of restraint, and then Tony yelling back at him as if he knows he lost the fight, but he's not willing to subvert himself. He has to take home something, and so he's just like, you don't deserve the shield, and as if to say nothing you do will ever be as good as I'll ever be. He just throws the shield down and goes, fine, you can have it. Which I did love. So, we're talking about like 2 to 5 minutes of film that enraged me to the point where it was hard for me to remember. I liked everything else about it. So, in retrospect, I might have been a little too hard on the Beaver, but I'll give you that one. But going forward, as you said, I think I can do both. I think I can come up with, and God knows Melissa has heard me do it, some real nonsensical logic by chance arguments defending certain things, including my own behavior. But then I'm trying. But I also want to take this. I don't want this show to devolve into, what PC Live became, which was just a parody of a political talk show. So I'm going to take it seriously. I really am going to struggle and try to pull the nuggets of goodness out of some dreck that I've nominated. I can't wait for it. I can't wait till we get to the one with Antonio Banderas and Lucy Liu.
Okay, but I'm warning you, when it comes to Catwoman, you only get to throw Halle Berry's boobs out there once.
If you want to really make this really challenging for me, you can just take it off the table now, okay?
You can. No, I'm going to be merciful, and I'm going to go ahead and let you have that one. But you cannot answer everything I'm going to put out there.
This is the worst acting I've ever seen. Yeah, but Halle Berry's boobs, sir. Hey, go ahead and do your plug.
You cannot throw out there Catwoman and the Sweater Kittens.
I duly noted, sir. I'll take that. All right. Go ahead and throw your plugs out there, and then let's bring this puppy to a close.
Okay. I've really only got one plug to toss out there this week, and that is the fact that this coming Sunday night, over on fpgnews.com, you might want to mosey over there right around 4 p.m. Mountain Time, because I am going to have live streaming, segment-by-segment coverage of one of my favorite WWE live events of the year, the Royal Rumble. This year it actually looks like it might possibly be surprisingly good after a couple of off years. I am most definitely looking forward to watching AJ Styles and John Cena, because I'm starting to believe that those two just don't physically have it in them to have a bad match with each other. God, that was not something I ever thought I would ever say about AJ Styles and John Cena. But this year there's actually a little bit of mystery as to who's probably going to win the Rumble. Some people are saying it's going to be The Undertaker. Some people are saying Samoa Joe. Personally, and hey, come at me, bros, with the flack, but I think it couldn't be more interesting than going with either The Miz or Jericho, because if there are two guys who have earned it this past year, it is those two, because they're the two people. They're two of the several people I could point to who have once more elevated being a heel to an art form. It's just nothing less than art, and Miz in particular has demonstrated why he may be the most unappreciated performer in the business. But anyway, the way this works is you go there, you click on the article, you hit refresh every so often as I update backstage segments, the individual matches. I have no idea how frequently I'm going to be updating the actual Rumble as it happens. That one right there is going to be me throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. But just a reminder, I do this for all WWE Network live events, except for NXT. We have other people who cover NXT for us. But, yeah, stop on by. Give us your clicks. Keep refreshing. Spend some time. Comment here and there if you would like to. But Sunday night, after I spend Saturday basking in the warm glow of NXT TakeOver, that is where I am going to be. So thank you, as always, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you if you listen live. Thank you if you download. Thank you if you pass this along to friends. Without you, there would be no us doing what we love to do. So, as always, before Mark takes us out, I am going to say, once again, thank you. Remember that $20 will buy mini peanuts, and never dull your colors for someone else's canvas.
All right, everybody. It's been real. It's been a show. Be well, be safe, and behave.